Today on the True Patriot Love Media Network, under the Pillar Economy, we're going to look at Bucket 2 of the 2025 federal budget. Capital expenditures budgeted by the federal government that are now being accounted for differently. In Part 1, we broke down the deficit numbers, understanding that the $507.5 billion in federal government revenues do not cover their expenses of $586.2 billion. This gives us a deficit, or as a corporation would say, a loss, of $78.3 billion for 2026. The 2025 budget was delivered months late, but was well written. Lots of work went into changing the full accounting of the budget from a cash basis to an accrual basis. We followed the UK in changing our accounting, but most Canadians, mainstream media, and our MPs struggled to follow the budget, focusing on the federal government's operating deficits of $78.3 billion for 2026. Not on the new or old capital expenditures, nor on the fact that the debt ceiling was being raised to $2.54 trillion. We needed to borrow a whopping $137.9 billion in 2026, and it's going to grow to $147 billion in 2027. Believe it or not, our capital expenditures for 2026 are $45.4 billion and $56.7 billion in 2027. On top of the deficit, understand these capital expenditures are not part of Bucket 1, the $78.3 billion operating deficit or loss. These capital expenditures are added on top of the operating losses. That is why the country had to borrow so much. When we dug into it, over 80% of the capital expenditures are simply part of old budgeted projects that have been in place since the Trudeau government. About 20% of the capital expenditures budget are from new programs. Is this status quo, or are new projects really happening? Why are the Conservatives bloc and NDP not asking for better accountability, reporting, and performance measures of these programs? We don't know. Federal budget approvals always have a lot of political grandstanding, but with the U.S. moving away from Canada, we need to focus as a country and not take old projects and repurpose them with no increase in productivity or GDP. Doing so will have dire consequences for all of us, individually and as a nation. So stay tuned and let us know your thoughts. Today on True Patriot Love, we're going to dig into Part 3 of the 2025 budget. I have Mike Wixon here again to go through capital expenditures. So we kind of uncovered a bunch of stuff over the last two, and quite frankly, it's very interesting when we dug into the capital expenditures of the government.
First of all, I'm going to recommend to people, go back to the other two episodes.
Yeah.
This is a completely new budget system. We've never seen budgeting like this in my life, I don't think.
Yeah.
It's based on, I guess, budgeting and finance approaches that are very different from what we've looked at before. And when you get past that, there's a lot to understand here about what's really new and what's already in play as part of the government's ongoing expenditures.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. And I totally agree. I tried to break down, last program that we did, I tried to break down the budget into two buckets, operating bucket and a capital bucket. And what I did, the slide that's up right now shows you the operating deficits from 2025 to 2027. So, I didn't go past 2027, quite frankly, because I didn't think, the listeners would want to do much more after we got to 2027.
Well, also at that point, it seems a little pie in the sky.
Yeah, it does. And I think we're going to have to, again, pivot. We're going to have to look at what's happening in 2027. And I think a lot of plans may be changing based on what we're finding at that time. So I think it's really important just to look at this year again. And for listeners, I won't spend a lot of time on it, but everyone remembers that the budget came out late. And quite frankly, 2026, we got the news that we were going to have a $78.3 billion operating budget deficit this month. So in November, we found out, hey, by the way, it looks like we're going to have overspent $78.3 billion on our operating deficit. And we're going to do some capital expenditures based on, as Mike said, a new accounting system. So we got a lot of news between October and November, what's happening in this budget. So I want to kick off. Before I kick off, I want to just say the important part of this, so in this capital expenditure program, is that we have to pay for the capital expenditure. So keep that in mind. And, on the last show, I kind of used, a personal finance analogy. Imagine this is, your business is losing money, and then you actually go out and you buy a new home and you decide to put a swimming pool in.
Right.
So
so now you've got to cover the expenses that are so difficult now in your business, and you've got to cover the new wonderful home and pool that you have, but you've put it all into a different scenario that makes it financing feasible over a long period of time.
Right. Exactly. Now,
hoping that your personal and business economy will come back.
And you're hoping that you can kind of have people come over and charge them to swim in your pool to pay for the house and the pool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
get ready to Airbnb. Canada, get ready to Airbnb this country.
So I know that's a little bit too simple, but
but it does make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the scenario we're in. And, again, I don't, not being too critical on this budget, I just want to say again that the budget itself is so well written. I'm very impressed with the actual writing of the budget and the guys who put it together and the amount of work it took to actually put it together. It's amazing that they got it off and got it put together. Some challenges as we're going to go through. So, again, capital expenditures for this year, so ending 2026, are going to be $45.4 billion.
Yep.
So when you have to finance the government for this year, you're looking for $137.9 billion in financing.
Wow.
Because you have your operating deficit and you have your capital expenditures, and then you have some to and fro of pension liabilities and stuff you have to bridge. So, when you do the math and you go through it all and you reconcile it all, that's what you need. In 2027, we have a $65.4 billion operating deficit, and our capital expenditures are $56.7 billion. We're going to need $149 billion to make it work. So that's our financing numbers.
That's the actual number.
That's the actual number. That's the money we're going to need to make it work. So
by 2027, $149 billion will be the budget.
Yeah. Now, going back to the rationale. So, Mike, you want to, and before the show, we were reading this. So there is a rationale why we did this. So why we changed our accounting structure, why we decided to do that.
It looks like it's been done in other parts of the world, like it's been justified and used in other places. Right.
They use the UK and Singapore, and some of the provincial budgets, quite frankly, they mentioned. But pretty much, they followed what the UK is doing, except for a few small tinkering changes. But, the government, and this is the statement of the government. The government is adopting a capital budget framework, a new way of budgeting that makes capital investment the national priority. Mm-hmm. This framework helps distinguish day-to-day operational spending from capital investment, broadly defined as spending that supports capital formation, allowing the government to identify and prioritize initiatives that deliver long-term economic returns. The framework also increases transparency, allowing Canadians to better understand what funds service today and what builds future prosperity.
May I chime in for a moment?
Sure.
Okay. A couple of questions, a couple of statements. The first question I have is, broadly defined as spending that supports capital formation. means absolutely nothing. This allows the government to identify and prioritize initiatives that deliver long-term economic returns. The old cash budgeting system didn't allow for that?
Yeah. Oh, sure it did. Right. I don't think what your plan is really, accounting shouldn't really impact it.
Right.
Right. So,
That's I do keep feeling that a little bit about this budget, to
No.
be honest with you.
Yeah.
It feels part marketing and part really sugar-coated bad news.
Well, I think, yeah, a little bit. We wanted to, in 2026, the budget came out late. We were already on this path.
Yeah.
So I think it was, okay, we're on a path. We didn't tell anyone about it.
Right.
So, a change in accounting would be helpful.
Well, hold on. We're in trouble and we didn't tell anybody about it. So now how are we going to package this up knowing that we have to spend so much more? Okay, spend only a little bit more and make the rest look like we're advancing the country with this bloated budget we're already working with. That's how it feels to me. I'll be honest with you, Paul.
Right. And I think they had already determined that they needed to try to spend out of the problem.
Yeah.
So, and whether, they had a budget out late, which they did. And so quite frankly, putting this on the balance sheet, capitalizing some assets and then expensing, having a large deficit, it is a way to kind of smooth it out. And so
it feels like it. Yeah,
it is. It
feels like Bondo. And for the youth of today, Bondo is how I kept my car together during the 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
So, at the beginning of the budget is a lot of really great charts. So one of the charts, I picked a couple of them out because I think they indicate what's happening very clearly. So we have one here that's budget 2025 projected deficits. So, and it says by 2028-29, the deficit will entirely support the investments that grow the economy.
Mm-hmm. Well, that remains to be seen, right?
Well, it's really kind of saying that our capital spending and our deficits will be almost equal. So what they're saying is they're going to match up. So as you can see that, we're going to have $58 billion in capital spend and we're going to have $58 billion roughly in deficits. So, that's the goal, is to kind of co-join them. So, they're kind of converging. So as your deficits are slightly going down, because our deficit right now is, coming out of 2026 is $78 billion. Yeah. It's a crazy amount. It's very high. And it's starting to go down to meet the capital expenditures. But combined, your capital requirement for the country is still very high. So your financing requirement is still the combination of the two, roughly, right?
So at that point, maybe I'm wrong. Did I just do the math wrong? It's 115 billion.
Yeah, plus again, all those pension and all those other operating liabilities, the reconciliation amounts. So you're probably still up around 125 or $130 billion.
It's interesting.
And financing requirements.
You just mentioned pensions as a liability, yet it shows up in this budget as an asset.
Yeah, it does. It kicks around, right? So pension assets, are sitting on the government's books on the balance sheet, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep. So the next one I had was capital investments. So this is the one where you see how capital investments from 2014-15, which were around $10 billion. It's bizarre how small it was actually when you look at it, are now kind of going to go up to $60 billion. And they're going to stabilize at the $60 billion level. So, the plan is in the future up until 2030, from starting, 24, is to increase, to the end at 2027, and then stay roughly around $60 billion a year.
So doubling the projected capital investment.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and hopefully having our deficits go down.
It's interesting. We talk about this. It's almost like the headline, our generational investments, because people are calling this a generational budget.
Right. Yeah, it's out to 2030. And quite frankly, they did a good job, and I commend, they did an excellent job on writing this budget. The guys who marketed this budget, put the marketing part of this budget together, did a really good job. There's lots of charts on the $280 billion 5-year spend in capital and expenditures, until you start to tie it into what that is. And that becomes the challenge. So the detail, the devil's in the detail.
Right.
So you start to break that number down and you say, okay, because I got excited. I was probably more excited at the beginning reading this budget than I was at the end.
It really did. It's funny. I was a little shocked, Paul, that you came out. We were sitting there and you said, I'll be honest with you. I like the budget. I don't dislike this budget. And I was like, wait, what just happened over there in that corner of the office?
No, I did. And I said it on a couple shows. I was excited. I had kind of predicted that they were going to try to spend out of it early on. I thought that was the right thing to do. And I thought new programs and new initiatives that increase productivity of the country was really the way to go. Yeah. I was convinced that was the direction they were going to go in. And so I was excited when I saw the announcement. And when I saw this chart, housing spend $25 billion over 4 years, defense security spending $30 billion over 5 years. I thought that was low. Yeah. $115 billion over 5 years for infrastructure, and $110 billion over 5 years for productivity and competitiveness.
It's interesting, Paul. We found out in a previous show that defense and security, that $30 billion will cover things that you may already think are infrastructure. So if you think it's tanks on the road, ships in the water, or guns in hand, it's not necessarily that. It could be repairing roads between Petawawa and Ottawa, for example.
Yeah, the blend between infrastructure and security blend quite a bit, right? But there's interesting articles today that are out that are talking about that you can't keep increasing your defense spend to save the country. And what they mean is, are they going to cause an increase in GDP and productivity?
Mm-hmm. Right. Not necessarily, right?
Not necessarily, right? Yeah. So because defense it's a necessity.
And it's an expense on the books.
Exactly.
It puts people to work, yes, but those are people that would otherwise be on the dole potentially, or supported in some other way financially by the government.
Right. And are you better to have to deploy them in an industry that is going to sell a product or export it abroad?
That's a great question.
And they're saying you are. It sounds better to have people working in industries that actually make cars or make planes or make
rather than make roads for Canada, rather than build airports or ports for Canada.
Exactly. Those are job programs. Mm-hmm. Those are make work projects, that go into the country to keep people active. And hopefully they go and they buy products with that money, so that you're looking for the offshoot of the money you give them at that point.
Which is minimal in comparison to doing import business and export business on the whole. So, the employee, the company, everybody involved in the actual commerce and corporate version of this stand a better chance at longevity and frankly a better career.
Yes.
Yeah.
But one of the things you have to do at that point, if you and some of this is a little challenging, because if you skew too much to projects that are not GDP, that do not enhance GDP growth.
Okay.
Right. And you are hoping for the offshoot spend. So let's use an example. You're paying the guy to build tanks, right? The guy, he's getting paid, he's making $100,000 a year. He goes and buys a home, and then he actually, vacations. He starts to buy a car, but he's buying all his materials for his home from China. Mm-hmm. So he's shipping in containers to build his homes full of materials. He's buying a car made abroad. So he's not buying a car made here, and he's vacationing in
another country. Yeah.
Right. So quite frankly, his whole spend is being imported. So that money is not.
It's not really staying in the country.
No, there's some things his food and stuff like that he's doing, he's paying his insurance. So there's some spends, but quite frankly, if you're going to shift your government expenditure to too many infrastructure programs, then you have to say to yourself, I then need to almost reduce my number of imports. So therefore, do I then create a tariff program to slow down the number of imports? So then I force, but then you're being Trump, right?
At that point, you're really shutting down business internationally.
Yeah, which is quite frankly, the Americans, by, if you look at what they do with their defense, with their $1 trillion spend on defense, one of the reasons was the money was going all outside the country. So, which wasn't helping him at all. It was just clicking up deficits, and it wasn't really making sense. So he shuts all that down. He internalizes it, stops importing, and basically says, I'll export only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we have that punching power, but
No, we don't.
it would be nice to be in that position.
But there is a balancing act on this slide. That's all I'm trying to make. Like, it's not as simple as spend all your money on infrastructure and the country will be okay.
No, it makes perfect sense to me that if we're just spending money on our own house and our own pool again, that there has to be some means for us to create income against that.
Right. You got it. So then, the devil's in the details. So, as I mentioned earlier. So then we started to break down. So now I'm not going to use buckets again. I'm going to use holes. There's 3 holes, right? So pretend we're golfing and we're on the first hole. The first hole in the capital expense world are called baseline expenses.
Right.
So baseline expenses are expenses that have existed. So if you look at the Trudeau era, these are expenses that have existed for
a decade.
Yeah, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So they're programs that he announced, he got going on, and quite frankly, they've been rolling. So that's what I was curious. When I started breaking down the budget, I started saying, okay, I get the accounting now. So you were seeing me with my handy blue pencil, right? I was, sitting there trying to figure out how he got to the capital expenditure numbers, and I couldn't.
Right.
And I thought, and it's funny because Christoph came to me and he was trying to, and he said, well, it's the problem because it's a reconciliation between cash and accrual accounting, right? And I said, oh, come on, I got to figure this out. So I kept going and I did figure it out. And what you have to do is you have to add up the 3 capital expense holes.
Oh, okay.
So the first hole, the second hole, and the third hole.
And those become your baseline spending?
They become your baseline capital expense. No, so they become your total capital capital expenditures. So
I understand.
All 3 of them, hole 1 plus hole 2 plus hole 3,
are the actual expenditures.
Right. Hole 2, which is a very simple one, are basically the capital expenditures that happened after the 2024 budget.
Okay.
So, and these happen in
new stuff.
Yeah, the federal economic statements from 2025 and 2020, all those policy changes that are in there up until now, this budget, are basically what we call, they call them FES 2024, Fall Economic Statement 2024. So these are the policy changes.
Right.
So these are kind of like the adjustments that happen. So that's hole 2. And then hole 3, which is the ones that are new in the 2025 budget.
Okay.
Right. So we went through them on our show last.
Which really, frankly, it doesn't look like a lot of new stuff in this budget, really.
In this budget, there's about 9. I think there's about 9 capital projects that were announced, which we'll go through and
take
do
a look
this.
at those. Okay.
But okay, so let's go back from it. Hole 1.
Yeah.
So we're golfing. We're going to the first tee. We're driving for hole 1. The baseline capital expenditures that we've seen from 5 to 10 years in the Trudeau era basically have just been increased. So, and that makes up almost 60% to 70% of the total capital expenditures. So these are programs that existed.
So this is not new investment with new ideas and new innovation. This is paying for what's already.
Some of those programs were announced, quite frankly, in lump sum, and we've just increased the expenditure in the years. So, for example, I took a look at, and you'll see on the slide, I took a look at these expenditures from 2025 to 2027. So, if you want to take, let's go through them.
Sure.
And I'm just going to focus on 2027. If I think there's a relevant increase. And we'll pick a few.
Yeah.
Let's pick a few and go through them. And then I think people will get the feeling for them. And I hope our listeners at home take the time and go through the list. There's 20 of them. There's 20 programs. I recognize most of them, to tell you the truth.
They all sounded familiar.
I had heard them in previous budgets. Yeah, I had heard them.
Maybe renamed a little.
Yeah.
By the way, this whole document will be available at tplmedia.ca. So when you look at any of these episodes, take a look for a copy of the PDF. It's really well done and very interesting.
So the first one's the Canada Community Building Fund, and they allocated the same as they did last year. They allocated $2.5 billion the 2027 budget.
The fund supports strategic local infrastructure investments, including roads and bridges, public transit, drinking water, wastewater systems, solid waste management, and recreational facilities. It's a long-term fund.
Yeah, this has been around forever. The community centers, roads, like you said, it's kind of the catch-all.
Yeah.
It's one of those funds they created years ago. They put a bunch of money into it. The team at the federal government sits around a table and they basically smatter it, and then they transfer it into the communities. And these are the ones that help the provinces stay afloat.
That basically, or keep the provinces flushing. Another one that you pointed out to me was investing in Canada infrastructure program. This is a big expense item.
Yeah, $3.1 billion this year in the 2027 budget, up about $400 million from 2026. And so it's growing, and quite frankly, it's growing at about 400,000 a year in growth, 400 million a year in growth.
So this is the partnership program with provinces, public transit, green infrastructure, community culture and recreation, and rural and northern development. Man, recreation gets an awful lot of funding in different programs here, huh?
Yeah, it seems to pop up. One of the recommendations that I would make, if they're going to try to clean up all their programs and policies, I know these have been allocated into funds for accounting purposes. So what they do is they set up accounts, and then they try to track what's happening through those. A great thing would be to actually split these up into funding programs, and then actually track them through and start to talk about how beneficial they are and what their outcomes are.
Yeah.
Give them some markers, like basic targets. Say, this one's going to increase productivity, or this one's going to build a road that's going to go to a mine that's going to one day produce. Like, it'd be nice to see how it ties into
if it's urban planning. Fantastic, because we don't seem to do enough of that, frankly.
Yeah.
God bless urban planners, but with short-term governments like we have in a democracy, things change so dramatically from government to government. So if that's what it goes toward, fantastic. I mean, that's definitely something that we need. But it needs to be managed, I think.
Yeah, it's got to be managed, because now in this critical time, when you're taking the leap to increase these numbers, like we have, and increase these budget items, you really have to be careful, because you have to actually track them through and say, is this program sustainable? Is it not sustainable?
Is it
keep this alive?
Is it reporting? So many programs seem to go into the vapor.
Exactly. So this is the challenge, because you don't want to, number one, you don't want to have a program go sideways on you, because then that'll hurt your credibility. And you want to be able to actively pivot when one program's not working.
Right.
Yeah. So more than ever, I think, and nowadays with social media and everything happen, I don't think you can really get away with not, like, people are actively in these programs, so you can do that for a while, but everything comes out in the wash, right? So,
but I do think some a little bit of oversight on this kind of money in this many categories, because there's a lot of silos underneath each of these.
Oh yeah.
What's another one that caught your attention?
Another one, the innovation, the Foundation of Innovation, Canada Foundation of Innovation, caught my curiosity, and the Strategic Innovation Fund. I think that's one you mentioned too, Mike.
Yeah. The Strategic Innovation Fund this was it's what I find difficult about this one, Paul, and I'll tell you at the onset, is once again measurement of success. The Strategic Innovation Fund provides large-scale funding to Canadian businesses and industries to support high-impact projects that drive innovation, clean growth, and economic transformation. We want everything to be clean, I noticed. With funding increasing from $1.7 billion to $2.9 billion, the SIF targets projects in advanced manufacturing.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's enter the marketplace of manufacturing. Clean technology, once again, we're being very clean. Life sciences, okay, that's health and living, and industrial transformation. This feels to me like it could end up in the ether, a lot of this money, and it's a very big increase.
Yeah, it is a big increase. Very important if you do it right.
Yeah.
This is We talked about yesterday on the operating expense show, we're going to go out and spend $260 million in 2027 to find people abroad who have specific skill sets to build. So you have to give them the resources to do that. So things like strategic innovation funds, if you do them well, there are countries that are very good at it. You know, I think Norway, I think is very good at it. There's some countries that do it really well. And quite frankly, you know, they identify projects, they find people, they bring engineers, they bring scientists, biologists, you know, they bring all those people in, and then they set them loose on a specific project to advance whatever they want in their country so they can sell it.
I was going to say that the net result of it is a pharmaceutical breakthrough or a patent that does benefit the economy overall.
Yes, that's the end result. There's a product.
The other one, maybe walk me through this one. Other provincial, territorial, and municipal infrastructure investments. Under the Investing in Canada plan, the federal government supports more than $180 billion in infrastructure over 12 years. Public transit, green infrastructure, boy, oh boy, social infrastructure, trade corridors, which is obviously something that we'll need to do if we're doing trade with other countries. We can't just cross the border. And rural and northern development. These contributions are designed to improve community resilience, reduce carbon emissions, Paul, and strengthen regional economies through cooperative investments with other levels of government. Take me through that.
Yeah, so $4.3 billion for 2027. So it's went up about $1 billion. So this is a big push. So again, you know, strategic infrastructure is great. So if you have, you know, always you have eroding infrastructure that you have to fix, and then you have strategic infrastructure. So, you know, if you're going up north and you're going to create infrastructure to build homes because you want to move people up there to build mines and you need workers, it makes sense. Right. But those are the things you have to plan. Like those are the things, and those are the things, quite frankly, we should be more we should be talking about more. You know, Australia did a good job of that. We mentioned on the show, the second show.
They built mining communities. They built infrastructure that made it appealing for people to be there. They created incentives for the corporations, which then brought investment because it was so favorable for a risky industry. In some cases, mining, for example, you have to have the government behind you to get investors to buy in as well. Yeah,
they said, listen, we think there's rare earth minerals in them hills. So they basically went out, built communities, and they moved people there.
In that case, they said, behind that huge, enormous rock over there on those flat lands. Another one that got me was the SHRED credits, tax incentives. This is interesting because to me, they're providing over $5 billion in tax credits. Tax credits are tied to somebody else's money going into this. This is not grant money.
Yeah.
Is this a lofty number to expect corporations to get out there to advance technology?
$5 billion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, you know, in this environment, which, you know, with everything going on in Canada right now, I think this is a little bit of definitely aggressive number. Is it going to go to the right people at the right time in the right places? Traditionally, it hasn't. That's the challenge.
It tends to go to companies that need a tax break.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
so that means they're somewhat profitable. Okay, that's great if you're Apotex or somebody like that who's developing but you probably also have the research funding in place to do that.
Yes.
So I don't think the right companies get this, and I wonder if maybe we would develop younger companies better by actually just investing this as grants. But
yeah, or strategically determining, again, that's direction, right? You have to point in the direction you want to go.
Makes sense, yeah.
And then you have to create the science that actually moves that industry along and makes it successful. So I think, again, it comes down to direction and accountability.
Okay, I'm not going to drag you through too many more of these. I have one more that I wanted to ask you about.
You got
it. Support for battery manufacturing. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. $169.4 million investment in Linamar Corporation to expand EV parts and semiconductor packaging, and up to $10 billion in production subsidies for key industry partners like Stellantis. They're gone.
Yeah.
LG Energy has yet to set up. Over $46 billion in EV supply chain investments. Am I wrong? Is this EV thing not dead. Stellantis is gone. The car manufacturers that manufacture electric cars are leaving Canada. What is this? What are we doing here?
I don't think we know. Honestly, I think it was actually all in the making when they were creating this budget. And I think all these new developments that happened over the last month, I just think given everything they had on there, you could remember this team putting the budget together.
They've been at it for months, yeah.
Well, they've been at it for months, and they've been converting cash accounting to accrual accounting. They've had to go back, 5-10 years. They've had to retrofit all their books and then create a whole new scheme. So probably as all these, I can only imagine the amount of work and the amount of labor these people had to go through. It's amazing that they got it done. It really is.
Underneath each of these programs are many programs.
There are many well, there's sub layers of all these programs, and there's the way to apply, and this goes on for pages and pages and pages. But at the end of the day, for 2027, so we talked about capital budget in 2027 of $56.6 billion. $48.5 billion are projects that are baseline or whole one. So they existed.
This is 2/3 of the budget, roughly?
Yeah, well, no, more than that, quite frankly, because, 80. Yeah.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, 80%. Yeah, 4/5. But so quite frankly, it's...
Oh, my God, it's 4/5 of the budget. We really aren't adding any new stuff to this budget, and it's enormous. How are we here?
We added, so what we did is we increased the line items of existing baseline projects. So if there was an infrastructure program that existed, we said we need more infrastructure.
They added more money to it.
Put more money into that program. My concern, here's my concern with that, and it's if this was working really efficiently and we were knocking it out of the park and doing a great job on all these items, whether it be infrastructure, strategic innovation, shred, battery manufacturing, housing, then I'd say great. Keep those rolling, put more money into them. But they've been sputtering.
Yeah.
So, I guess my next question, which I mentioned on the show yesterday, is where I don't really understand where the opposition right now is not talking about this.
It's a great question. I mean, not in this detail for certain. I mean,
well, why don't they talk about guardrails and putting on reporting and accountability? You can say, I want to vote down the budget. And I know, I get why they're doing that. I understand, I don't like this budget, whether the Bloc or the Conservatives. Did you put up any alternatives on how to monitor the budget?
Which of these programs you'd like to see changed?
Or how do we determine how they're working? Like in this day and age, with the technological developments and the things people can do, whether it be AI, all the things you can do to map, track, analyze, you should be able to quickly get across this budget and say, break this budget down in all to the components, measure it, and tell me which one's working based on the targets I set. I'm sure that's an easy task to actually.
That's a great point, Paul. Why don't we start at that spot rather than voting this down?
Yeah, exactly. And who would argue with that? How do you argue about? So how do they? I guess the question I'd have if I was sitting on the other side and I was listening to this, I like the budget. I like the fact that they're trying to spend and they're trying to increase investment. Tell me how we track it. Let's sit down together and figure out how do we make sure that we identify key initiatives, track them, report on them, and keep driving to grow the country. That's what I'm.
Is there a lack of ROI? Discussion in this budget?
I think it's not just ROI. I think it's quite frankly, it's a number of target indicators, key performance indicators that you should have in place, and you should publicly talk about them.
I wonder if that's part of the problem here. I mean, this might have been better received if it was better explained. If the PM came out and said, "Look, we're going to do things a little differently. The budget's been delayed. We're going to change the way that we do this, and here's why we're doing it. Here's what you're going to expect. We're not going to spend huge money on a new rocket ship program here in Canada. We're going to pay for what we've already promised properly for the first time and catch up." If that was the explanation that I was given, I think even as as part of the opposition, I'd be more interested in participating in that.
Yeah, and here's how I'm going to tie it. Here's the indicators that I'm going to tie it back to, the
Right.
growth indicators, and here's how each of the programs tie in. Right, show me the path, and I think you're right. Sometimes I think it is a communication. Like
It feels like they think that we already know what they're doing.
right, or we don't care. But
Yeah.
I think people do care. Like, the amount of people that are talking to me about the budget on the weekend and talk as I move around, and they're asking the question they don't understand. Probably why we started these shows is because the number of people who are having that conversation, it's not a small number. And what this was the most downloaded budget in the history of budgets.
It's so funny because we're lucky we have Paul. And so I noticed on that day, all the PDFs being printed out, and it's 400 pages, and we're going, wait, hold on. But we all kind of came to you right away saying, why so much?
Yeah.
And I remember your reaction was, I don't know, but there's something to this. There's something different. And sure enough, it is. We've changed accounting systems.
Yeah. Well, in October, we had, he had talked about it, quite frankly, it was a mention.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's coming, right? And we were like, okay, and the media hit on it quickly. It was a one-day story and then disappeared. I don't think the mainstream media has really come back on it. I think they've just glazed over it.
I have to tell you, if you're watching this, you probably share with a friend, because this is discussion that I'm not hearing anywhere, just at the basics of how this budget is arrived at.
Well, and I think it's a little bit of a disservice sometimes for them to just say it's a terrible budget.
Well, yeah.
They don't know, quite frankly. They haven't asked the question. I don't think in the two non-confidence votes we had, I think they would have been better served to ask for some things to be highlighted and agreed upon versus just saying no. And then, so then if the third one goes through and the budget passes because, the NDP abstains or whatever, you're not really going to know because you didn't ask for anything constructive to be changed.
Also, I don't see the opposition asking questions about what this or that means or challenging them on this is not a new program.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it gives the government a chance to say, no, we know we're doing this and we're increasing it in this way, and we're staying the course.
Yeah, and it didn't work. So again, the opposition, if you're in Ottawa and you're there every day, you should know which programs are
operating properly.
If you don't know which of these programs, there's 20 programs in whole one, the baseline program. If you don't have a clue which one is working and not working, that's a problem.
Yeah.
You're not asking the right questions,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
You're just opposing.
Yeah. So second hole. So, I'm moving on to the second hole. I'm taking my clubs. I'm driving over to the second hole.
Sorry, I took so many swings on the last hole.
Yeah,
Paul.
that's all right. I'm not going to say what the score was. And, so this one's only has 3 items in it. And they're very small. Well, not the first one's not very small, but this is the adjustment that happens in the federal economic statements from 2024 to the current budget.
What does that mean?
So when they make a policy, they do vote things in, after the 2024 budget was dropped, they made changes, right? There's policies, there's bills that get passed. So quite frankly, they allocate monies to them and they have to go somewhere. So they have to adjust the budgets to accommodate for the monies they allocate. Most governments, unfortunately, don't find it in another place. They add on.
Right.
So that's why, quite frankly, you hear it all the time on different shows, and very seldom do federal budgets end up being what they say they are. When they come in as actuals,
right,
they tend to be much higher. Now in this one, I hope we're not much higher because this is a pretty high budget. But there's really 2 items, and there's the funding for the high-speed rail. I always laugh when I hear that because it's been on the books for years. So who's
using the not high-speed rail right now? How many people? Nobody. Yeah,
it's pretty quiet. Yeah. So they want to spend $2 billion. They actually, which is interesting, when they said they've actually spent $1 billion or 900 million in 2026. So I didn't even know they were doing that.
Well, they got as far as Kingston, I guess. What's it between Toronto and Ottawa? This is the most ridiculous
Quebec,
idea.
Quebec, and yeah.
I know I'm supposed to stay professional during these episodes, Paul, but that one I don't understand.
Well, somewhere along the way, $900 million went into something this year, I assume.
Did you invoice them for anything? I didn't.
No, I didn't. So 2027, they're talking about 1.1 billion. So, there is a plan afoot to spend 2 billion on the speed rail or the high speed rail. So that I don't know. Let's see. At the end of 2027, is there going to be a new rail?
We'll be able to sell that off to the same guys who bought our 407.
Yeah. Well, if it's there.
At a loss.
Yeah. So then this was interesting. There's extending mineral exploration tax credit, $100 million.
Okay. So may I just stop there for one moment? We talk a lot about the resources we have in mining in Canada. Why so little money put toward getting it out of the ground?
They're not talking a lot about it. It's interesting. Specifically, there are some programs. So I'm not saying they're not. They have infrastructure programs that can be used for mining, whether it be roads and they have housing. But they're not, specific.
But you need the actual mine. You need.
Yeah, exactly. But that is interesting. But they're not really. Again, that's where I struggle a little bit with some of the thinking on this budget, because if you're, all our lives we've heard mining, we're mineral rich. Okay,
exactly. Yeah.
We're mineral rich. Again, I don't mean to use Australia again, but they said they're mineral rich, and then they went out and set up programs and got the minerals.
They also said that they had rare earth minerals, and they did. And we said we had rare earth minerals and then changed it to critical minerals.
Yeah, critical minerals. Yeah, we started off at rare and we ended up at critical, right?
So it makes me wonder, why so little attention on this industry overall?
I don't know. It's honestly, it's disappeared. I would, it's a great question. We're going to do some future shows on it. And I think what we need to do now is we need to actually break down critical minerals and break down what we do have and start to ask the questions. I think it's a great question, and learn. I think it's a question, I've always, when you're sitting in a bar having a drink and people talk about Canada, the first thing almost everyone says is, well, we have lots of lumber,
Okay.
We have a lot of critical minerals.
We do? Oh.
Okay. Right. So we're land rich and mineral rich.
But we're not digging any of it out of the ground. I understand there's a lot of red tape in that industry.
Yeah.
I get it. Why do you think there's a lot of red tape in that industry?
I don't know.
I'll tell you, it's to keep it honest.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's a lot of risk involved in mining. And so
of course,
while we might be the richest in minerals and mining, we don't know that. And so we're also the richest in risk.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's any mining has a lot of risk.
Yeah.
Yeah. You dig a hole. You hope that hole you dug, which you found in it, has the same thing 10 feet away.
I'm not going to lie to you. I found a bolt in the backyard this weekend, Paul, digging, and I'm going to need a little bit of investment money to go deeper.
All right. So you're on par last hole. So we're moving on to hole 3, which is basically, this is the budget, right? This is what's in budget 2025. And so these are the 9 areas I talked to you about. And the first one we talked about in previous shows is the generational infrastructure. So that's $2.3 billion for 2027. Protecting workers and transforming Canada's industries, equipping companies with growth and diversification is $800 million. A new trade infrastructure, so that's $0.7 million. That's ports. Remember, that was the one.
Oh, yeah, that's right. With
the ports,
the very distant projects,
the corridors.
Yeah. Once again, the corridors thing makes sense to me.
Yeah, it does.
If we're going to do business elsewhere, I get it. Yeah.
The Arctic, Arctic, all those places, it makes sense
for our sovereignty. Frankly, a little protection up there, and some new relationships.
It does. Yeah. Strengthening First Nations infrastructure, financing, and I know this one gets you every time, and access clean water. I know that one drives you crazy. That's $700 million.
I just think that everybody, it's been so many years of trying to get clean water. I don't understand.
Yeah.
We really need to look into that.
No, I'm with you. And it does sound, I think it's just one that you can't say no to, right?
Right.
So every time you say, make sure people get clean water.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. It's time to move on at some point here, right? And figure it out. rebuilding, renaming, and reinvesting in Canadian Armed Forces. So this one's a head scratcher to me every single time, I got to admit, because I know, we had 10 billion in the operating expenses on top of our existing. So
Right.
For everyone, we talked about it on the second show. There's standing expenses in government. So that's the 27-30 billion dollars we spend on the military. Then we said this year we're going to spend more money. So we added it as a project to go another 10 billion basically in operating expenses. And then we put 800 million aside for capital items. So these are items that they want to capitalize. They're assets. They're things that are going to have a life over 5 years.
Okay.
So, I found that interesting. So I know we're on a big push to recruit people and get things off the ground and move, but I thought this number would be bigger. I really did.
It seems really small. The other thing is renaming it. That's a shocker to me. Canadian Armed Forces being renamed seems like, it seems like what they've done with the budget. They've renamed it. They've reframed it. They've given it a different spin. But I think that we need more than a different spin.
Yes, I agree. Other is 200 million. I wasn't.
I'm so sorry. What?
I haven't been. I'll dig into it more, but I haven't found what that is.
No, Paul, you got to find that 200 mil because we know where that's going.
That's that rounding error. That's that rounding error.
Okay.
That's a poor accountant sitting there and goes, "I'm 200 off."
You know what we really need is a productivity super deduction at this point.
Yeah.
What in God's name is that?
Well, that's that. Remember those super deductions that we had, where you could expense your equipment faster.
I understand.
That's all that. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
That's all that. But I was, it's funny you say that because it's $300 million.
It's not. I don't know what that's doing. So one's got me nervous. The smaller the number, the more nervous I become, Paul, because that just sounds like it's going away.
Well, here's the interesting thing. So all those 5 chapters that we went through yesterday, which we went through the operating expenses for the most part, when we come to the capital expenses, these are them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and one of them is other, and the other one is a super deduction. Yeah. So those are the 9 I mentioned. Yeah. And then launching Build Canada Homes. So that's the 1.8 for 2027. That's the Annabayul.
That's creating the program.
Well, that's them building housing. So they remember that was when they announced her. So that's them going out. Sorry, federal government. That's the Canadian government going out through her program and building whatever homes, apartments, whatever they want. So that's them building. So they said that they would to speed up affordable housing, they would do that.
Well, look at this, Paul. Here we are.
Yes.
A summary of capital expenditures. Now,
this
is interesting in the sense that 2025 we're already 32.2 in.
Well, no, 26. So 25 is done. We spent remember, we never got an accounting for 2025.
So this is just a nefarious number outside of what we've spent that we're not sure of yet.
No, that's done.
Okay.
No, that's done. That's already been spent. So look at it this way. Remember, the government was changing, all the elections and everything.
We just coasted for the better part of 6 months, right?
So we really never, 2025 was over, really never talked about it because it ended in 2020, March 31st. We got going through that, and basically we got going to now, which is we're going to be in the 2026 fiscal year, and we're in it. So quite frankly, and we're going to spend 45.4 billion on capital expenses,
right,
under the new accounting system, right? And then in 2020, so when all the smoke clears and we're finally get back on schedule, when we're delivering budgets and when we're reporting, we're going to spend $56.6 billion in capital expenses on top of our 65 billion operating deficit. Most of it is in baseline programs, that 48.5 billion I mentioned, on baseline programs that existed for the last 5 to 10 years. We've just increased the amount. And a small amount of it is in new budget items.
Okay, so new budget items, 1.2 this year coming up.
Yep.
Then it hockey sticks up to in election year, allegedly, there's going to be money flying everywhere, $7 billion toward these new programs. The one thing I've noticed about the budget is it really does ramp up to the next election.
Oh yeah, that's that chart I showed you at the beginning with the capital budgets going up, right? So now, strategic, yes. Challenging. Here's the issue, you know, with the economy and the way things are going and the U.S. tariffs and everything else, we do need to make these investments work. So these capital investments, even I know they're hockey sticking up, and as we talked about, but they need to start producing.
Well, it looks like we're a couple of years away from really starting to see us beginning these programs, because if the money comes online in 2027, that's when you can apply for it. That's when the budgeting really occurs. So we're looking at 2028, 2029 before we start to even know.
But that's the importance of prioritizing your key objectives and then driving them, cutting red tape. And that's what a lot of countries are doing right now. Quite frankly, we're not leading the pack.
No.
Yeah, they're figuring out what they do well. They're prioritizing, they're cutting red tape to it, and they're going and getting so they can export it around the world to get growth in their own economy.
Paul, thanks for taking the time, because I know I should point this out to anybody watching or listening. Many hours over your weekend and your evening. So since the budget came out, you, Christoph, Beacon, the whole gang, Nick, everybody involved in presenting this budget to Canadians, I appreciate it, because we now, for the first time ever in my life, I've actually looked at a budget. Now I will know moving forward the things that we're looking at that are, okay, this is how much it's costing us just to operate. If that's what it's costing us to operate and it doesn't agree with me, I'd like to see our government shrink that. And if I'd like to see more new ideas, then we need to encourage the government to spend the money that way. But until you actually understand the budget, there's no way for you to be able to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the purpose of the last few shows. I really, and I hope everyone enjoyed them or listened in. And please, I always ask people, if you have any questions or you have comments or you want to add to something we've had on the show, please send them in, email us, send us your comments. We'd love to hear them, and we'll answer them. Well, and upcoming shows we'll address them.
I promise that's true. You've answered every question, even the dumb ones that I've had, and I've had many of them about this budget. They've all been welcomed. So once again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And please, everyone, stay tuned. We have a few new shows as the budget evolves. We have the vote coming up for the non-confidence vote, so we'll be keeping you posted to see the outcome of that. And subscribe, stay tuned, and enjoy.